The galaxy had always whispered about human courage, but no one truly understood it until the war began. The conflict was not started by humans. It was born in the cold laboratories of the alien empire known as the Kareth, a species that ruled with fear and had mastered the art of breaking other civilizations through experiments. They saw every new race not as equals but as test subjects, pieces of living flesh to cut, change, and discard. When they first captured a small group of humans, the Kareth believed it would be no different than the thousands of species before. In the dark halls of their ships, an alien girl was one of their prisoners. She was not like the others. Her body had been altered, wires and strange implants pulsing with alien light. The Kareth wanted to create a weapon out of her, a creature stripped of mercy and built only for destruction. But deep inside, she fought to keep her own soul alive. Even while pain ran through her veins, her eyes still glowed with something the aliens could not erase: hope. From Earth's perspective, the war came without warning. Human colonies were attacked, their soldiers overwhelmed by advanced alien technology. Yet in the chaos, stories began to spread of survivors being taken, of young women and men vanishing into the night sky, never to be seen again. Rumors traveled fast. The aliens were not killing all their captives, they were experimenting on them. To humanity, this was worse than death. Among the scattered resistance was a single human soldier named Darren. He had no rank left, no command to follow, only the memory of what the aliens had stolen from him. His sister had been taken in the first raids. For months he carried that pain like a weapon, fighting in shadows, waiting for the day he might strike back. But when he heard whispers of an alien girl imprisoned and changed, his heart moved in, a way he didn't expect. She was not human, yet she was suffering the same way his sister had, and that was enough for him to risk everything. The alien ship orbiting above a shattered world was where fate pushed him. Its lights glowed cold against the night sky, casting long shadows across burned forests and ruined cities. While most soldiers would have called it suicide, Darren called it necessary. He knew the Kareth would not expect a lone human to come this far, and he used that to slip through their defenses. Inside the ship, he moved silently through corridors filled with alien symbols and glowing walls. The stench of chemicals mixed with the hum of machines. Each door he passed revealed something worse: creatures half alive, screaming softly in their sleep, machines attached to their veins. But nothing prepared him for the chamber where she was kept. The alien girl lay on a bed of metal, her body bound with wires and armor that looked like it grew from her skin. Her glowing eyes opened slowly, locking onto him with both fear and wonder. She looked like a weapon, but her gaze begged for something more: release, compassion, mercy. For a long moment he stood frozen. He had expected a monster, but he found someone who still carried the spark of life. The Kareth scientists around her turned in shock when they saw him. Alarms blared, red lights filled the room, and weapons were raised. But Darren didn't move back. He stepped forward, pulling his weapon close, his heart pounding harder than ever before. For him, this wasn't about glory or victory. It was about proving that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, mercy could still be stronger than cruelty. The alarm screamed through the alien ship, echoing like the roar of a beast. Red light washed over the cold walls as armored guards rushed into the chamber. The Kareth scientists hissed and barked orders, their voices sharp and filled with panic. They had never expected a human to break this deep into their vessel. To them, humanity was fragile, slow, and weak compared to their empire. Yet here stood Darren, rifle steady in his hands, eyes burning with determination. The alien girl's gaze followed him, her glowing eyes wide with confusion. She had been tortured, reshaped, and forced to endure unending pain, but this was the first time someone had come for her. She could not understand why. To the Kareth, she was nothing more than a failed experiment, a weapon still unfinished. To Darren, she was proof that the alien's cruelty could not erase the soul within. The first guard lunged forward, its body covered in jagged armor plates and its claws sharp as blades. Darren fired, the shot echoing like thunder in the confined room. The creature fell, but more came, hissing with fury. He moved quickly, Every shot precise, every step calculated. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for her. The girl struggled against her restraints as chaos filled the chamber. The wires dug into her skin, the machines around, her flashing with warning lights. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as stray blasts struck the walls. She whispered something in her own language, a sound both desperate and beautiful, but the meaning was clear. Help me. Darren didn't hesitate. Between volleys of fire, he dashed to her side. His hands worked furiously to tear at the cables and bindings, but the alien technology resisted. The restraints were fused to her body as if grown from her flesh. His jaw tightened. If he couldn't free her, all of this would be for nothing. One of the Kareth scientists sneered, its voice dripping with contempt. You cannot save her, human. She belongs to us. She is no longer alive, only a tool. Darren's answer was not words. He swung his rifle, striking the alien across its skull, dropping it in silence. Then he returned to the bindings, refusing to let despair win. The girl's eyes, glowing brighter now, seemed to give him strength. He could not let her believe she was only a weapon. She had to see that someone cared enough to fight for her. Suddenly, the chamber shook as reinforcements approached. Heavy footsteps echoed through the halls. Darren knew he couldn't fight them all. He pulled a small blade from his belt, jamming it into the alien locks that kept her restrained. Sparks flew as he forced it deeper, the metal screeching against the strange technology. With one final push, the restraints cracked and released their grip. The girl gasped as her arms came free. She pushed herself up, trembling, her movements stiff and broken. Darren reached for her, steadying her against his chest. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost forever, gentleness. But mercy did not mean safety. The doors to the chamber burst open, and a squad of armored Kareth soldiers poured in, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Darren shielded the girl, pulling her close as the soldiers raised their guns. He knew he could not fight them all. His weapon was nearly out of charge, his strength fading with every breath. Yet the girl's hand touched his arm, her skin warm despite the alien metal embedded in her body. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, but filled with a strange power. She spoke words he could barely understand, but the meaning was unmistakable. I will fight too. Her eyes flared brighter, the implants in her body pulsing with energy. The Kareth had turned her into a weapon, but they had never expected her to choose who that weapon would be used against. And in that moment, standing together, they prepared to face the storm. The chamber erupted in a storm of fire and light. The Kareth soldiers unleashed their weapons, filling the room with searing beams of energy. Darren pulled the alien girl close, rolling them both behind an overturned table of machinery as blasts scorched the walls around them. The air smelled of burning metal and smoke. He gritted his teeth, knowing their shelter wouldn't hold for long. Beside him, the girl's body trembled. Strange energy rippled under her skin, lighting the implants that ran along her arms and chest. Her breathing grew heavy as she pressed her palm to the ground, and the metal floor responded with a low hum. Darren stared, realizing for the first time what the Kareth had tried to make her. She was more than a victim. They had turned her into something powerful, a weapon that could bend their own machines. Her eyes glowed brighter, and the lights in the chamber flickered. The Kareth soldiers hesitated for a moment, confused by the sudden surge of power. That hesitation was enough. Darren rose from cover and fired, his shot striking two of them before they could react. Sparks flew as alien armor shattered, but there were still too many, and his weapon was running low. The girl stood slowly, her body swaying as if carrying a heavy burden. Her hand lifted, and the wires that once held her captive sparked back to life, but now under her control. They shot across the room like whips, wrapping around the legs and arms of the soldiers. The aliens shrieked as the very technology they trusted betrayed them. Darren's eyes widened in awe. She was turning their cruelty into her strength. Still, the effort was tearing at her. He could see the pain etched into her face, the way her body shook with every surge of energy. The implants were unstable, dangerous, and using them was slowly burning her alive. He rushed to her side, gripping her arm. "Stop! You'll kill yourself!" he shouted. Her gaze met his, fierce yet fragile. "Better than theirs," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of defiance. The soldiers broke free of the wires and fired again, forcing Darren to drag her back into cover. He knew she couldn't keep using her power without destroying herself. They needed another way out. His eyes darted to the ceiling, where a maintenance shaft ran above the chamber. If they could reach it, they might escape deeper into the ship. "Up there," he said quickly, pointing. The girl followed his gaze, nodding weakly. Together they moved as blasts rained around them. Darren fired cover shots, each one precise, keeping the soldiers back for precious seconds. He boosted her up first, her slender form pulling into the shaft with surprising strength despite her exhaustion. Then he jumped, grabbing her extended hand as another volley tore through the spot where he had just been standing. They crawled through the narrow passage, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. The ship groaned around them, alive with alarms and orders shouted in alien tongues. Darren's chest heaved with each breath, sweat dripping down his brow. The girl crawled ahead of him, her glowing eyes lighting the darkness of the shaft. Finally, they dropped into another chamber, smaller and quieter. It looked like a storage bay filled with crates and strange devices. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body shaking violently from the strain. Darren knelt beside her, steadying her shoulders. He could feel the heat radiating from her implants, see the scars the experiments had carved into her skin. "You're safe for now," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was true. Her eyes opened slowly, meeting his with a faint shimmer of gratitude. "Why?" she asked in a broken voice. "Why risk everything for me?" Darren didn't answer right away. He thought of his sister, of all the innocence stolen by the Kareth. He thought of the cruelty he had seen in their laboratories. Finally he spoke, his voice steady. "Because mercy is what makes us human, and I won't let them take that from me or from you." Her lips trembled, and for the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she was more than a weapon. Perhaps she could still be free, but freedom would not come easily. Heavy footsteps echoed outside the chamber door. The Kareth had found them again. The storage bay door shook as something heavy slammed against it. Dust rained from the ceiling with each strike, and the alien girl flinched at the sound. Darren pulled her behind a stack of crates, his mind racing. The Kareth soldiers were not going to stop. They would tear the ship apart if it meant reclaiming their experiment. The girl leaned against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her implants flickered dimly like dying stars. She whispered, "They will not let me go. They will never allow it." Darren's eyes hardened. "Then we don't give them the choice." He moved quickly, opening the crates around them. Inside, he found alien weapons, sleek and deadly. Most were unfamiliar, but one looked simple enough, a compact energy rifle. He pressed it into her hands. "Can you use this?" Her fingers wrapped around the weapon slowly. For a moment she stared at it, then nodded. The glow in her eyes brightened faintly, as if a spark of strength had returned. The door finally gave way, bursting open in a storm of sparks. A squad of Kareth soldiers stormed inside, their weapons raised. Darren and the girl opened fire together. Blasts of light filled the bay, striking armor, ricocheting off walls and turning the air into a haze of smoke and burning metal. Darren moved with purpose, covering her flank as she fought. Her aim was shaky at first, but soon she steadied, her focus sharp. Each shot she fired carried both anger and hope, as though every pull of the trigger was a rejection of what they had tried to make her. But the Kareth kept coming. More soldiers poured into the room, their armored boots pounding against the metal floor. Darren gritted his teeth, realizing they were being cornered. He spotted a console across the bay, glowing faintly with alien symbols. If he could reach it, maybe he could open another path. "Cover me," he shouted. The girl nodded, forcing herself up despite the pain. She unleashed a barrage of fire that lit the chamber in bursts of orange light. Darren sprinted across the floor, diving behind, wreckage as beams flew past him. He reached the console, his hands flying across the controls. Most of the symbols were meaningless, but he pressed anything that looked like a release command. The ground shook as a hidden hatch in the floor slid open, revealing a maintenance shaft leading down into the darkness. "This way," he yelled. The girl stumbled toward him, firing one last volley before following. Together, they dropped into the shaft, just as another wave of soldiers stormed the room above. The hatch slammed shut behind them, cutting off the sound of battle. They landed, hard on the lower deck, the air thick with the hum of machinery. This part of the ship was darker, colder, filled with pipes and shadows. The glow of the girl's eyes lit their path as they moved cautiously forward. For a while, the only sound was the echo of their footsteps and the distant pulse of the ship's engines. Darren glanced at her, noticing how pale she looked. "You're hurt," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Not hurt. Broken. They changed too much." Darren stopped, turning to face her. "Listen to me. Whatever they did, it doesn't define you. You're not their weapon. You're alive. And as long as you're alive, you get to choose who you are." Her lips parted slightly, as though his words struck something deep inside her. No one had spoken to her like that since before her capture. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe him. But before she could answer, the walls around them trembled. A deep metallic roar echoed through the corridor, shaking the pipes above. The girl's eyes widened in fear. "Not soldiers," she whispered. "Something worse." The shadows shifted, and from the far end of the passage, a towering figure stepped forward. Its body was massive, covered in dark armor and pulsating with red light. Unlike the soldiers, this one moved with terrifying precision. The Kareth had unleashed one of their enforcers, a creature built to destroy anything that threatened their experiments. Darren tightened his grip on his weapon. He knew this fight would be unlike any before. The enforcer stepped fully into the dim corridor, its heavy footsteps shaking the deck with each stride. It was taller than any soldier Darren had faced, its body a fusion of flesh and machine. Black armor plates covered its chest and shoulders, glowing veins of red energy running across its limbs. Its face was hidden behind a mask of steel, with only two burning eyes staring out like twin suns of rage. The alien girl froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had seen this creature before in the laboratories. It was not just a guard, it was a monster built to silence any who dared resist. It was the Kareth's executioner, unleashed only when all else failed. Her implants flickered weakly, her body trembling with memories of its merciless strength. Darren raised his weapon, though he knew the odds were grim. The enforcer let out a low, mechanical growl, its claws extending with a hiss of steam. Then it charged. The corridor exploded into chaos. Darren fired rapidly, energy blasts slamming into the enforcer's armor, but they barely slowed it down. Sparks bounced off its chest as it barreled forward, swinging one massive claw. Darren dove aside, the strike tearing through the wall where he had just stood. The girl cried out, lifting her hands. Energy surged from her implants, striking the enforcer with a wave of blue light. The creature staggered for a moment, but then pushed through, its armor glowing hotter as it absorbed the impact. She fell back against the wall, gasping, her body unable to handle the strain of another attack. Darren rushed forward, sliding beneath the enforcer's swing. He slashed at its leg with his combat blade, sparks flying as metal screeched. The creature roared, lashing out with a kick that sent him crashing into the far wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself to stand. The girl crawled toward him, her voice weak. "You cannot fight it. It cannot be killed." He spat blood, shaking his head. "Everything can be killed." The enforcer lunged again, its claw cutting the air like a blade. Darren ducked, rolling across the floor, firing into the creature's exposed joints. One shot struck true, burning into the cables along its side. The enforcer roared, its movement slowing slightly. It wasn't invincible. It had weaknesses. The girl saw it too. Her eyes glowed brighter, her implants flaring with unstable energy. She clenched her fists, forcing the nearby machinery to spark and shudder. Pipes burst above, raining steam and fire onto the enforcer. The creature hissed, momentarily blinded. "Now!" she cried. Darren charged, slamming his blade into the creature's side where the armor had cracked. The enforcer howled, swinging wildly. He held on, driving the blade deeper as the girl unleashed another surge of power. The corridor shook, lights flickering violently. For a moment it seemed as if they might actually bring it down, but the enforcer's strength was monstrous. With a violent twist, it threw Darren across the hall again, ripping the blade free. It staggered, sparks flying from its wound, but it did not fall. Its burning eyes locked onto the girl. She backed away, fear filling her chest. Her implants pulsed, painfully, threatening to tear her apart if she pushed again. Darren forced himself up, blood running from his lip, his vision blurred. He saw the enforcer closing in on her, claws raised for the final strike. With the last of his strength, he hurled himself forward, slamming into the creature's back. His weapon fired point blank into its exposed joint, searing through metal and flesh. The enforcer roared in agony, stumbling. The girl seized the moment. Her implants blazed with one final surge, sending a torrent of energy into the enforcer's chest. The red glow in its veins flickered, then shattered in a burst of sparks and smoke. The monster collapsed, its body hitting the floor with a deafening crash. Silence filled the corridor, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. Darren leaned against the wall, chest heaving, while the girl knelt on the floor, trembling from exhaustion. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, her voice soft and full of disbelief. "You fought for me." Darren looked at her, his expression steady despite the pain. "I didn't come this far to watch you die." Her eyes shimmered with something new, something she had almost forgotten how to feel: trust. The enforcer's corpse lay smoldering in the corridor, its metal frame cracked and sparking. The stench of burnt flesh and steel hung heavy in the air. Darren leaned against the wall, struggling to steady his breath. His ribs ached with every movement, but his eyes never left the alien girl. She sat on the floor, her chest rising and falling rapidly, the glow of her implants dimming as if a fire inside her was dying. For a moment there was silence. Then the girl whispered, her voice weak but steady. "No one has ever stood between me and them. Not once." Darren crouched beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Get used to it, I'm not leaving you behind." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes, the kind of gaze that belonged to someone who hadn't been shown kindness in years. But their fragile pause was broken by the sound of metal grinding somewhere above. The ship was alive with activity. Soldiers regrouping, commanders barking orders. The Kareth would soon realize their enforcer was dead, and then they would come with even greater force. Darren helped her to her feet. "We need to move." The girl nodded, leaning on him for support as they pushed deeper into the ship. The corridors here were darker, lined with strange machinery humming softly. The air was colder, filled with the faint hiss of gas escaping from pipes. They turned a corner and stepped into a wide chamber. The sight froze them both. Rows of pods stretched across the room, each one glowing faintly. Inside lay prisoners from dozens of species, some asleep, some thrashing weakly against their restraints. Tubes ran into their veins and wires pierced their skin. It was a factory of suffering, a laboratory designed to twist life into weapons. The girl's hands trembled as she pressed against the glass of the nearest pod. Inside was a small alien child, no older than 8 in human years, its eyes wide with fear as it reached weakly toward her. Her voice cracked. This is what they made of me." Darren's jaw clenched. He looked at the endless rows of victims and felt his anger rise like fire. Then this ends now. He searched the chamber until he found a control panel. Alien symbols blinked across its surface. He didn't understand the language, but the patterns were familiar enough. Release, shut down, override. His hands flew across the controls, hitting what he hoped were the right commands. The pods hissed. One by one they began to open. Prisoners collapsed onto the floor, weak and trembling but alive. The air filled with the sound of coughing and cries, a mix of voices from across the galaxy. The girl knelt beside the child she had seen, gently pulling the tubes from its arms. Her touch was careful, her voice soft, almost motherly. The child blinked at her, then clung to her trembling hands. Tears welled in her glowing eyes as she looked back at Darren. He gave a small nod. "You're not their weapon. You're their hope." But hope came at a cost. From the far end of the chamber, the sound of boots echoed once more. The Kareth soldiers had found them. The freed prisoners, weak and frightened, huddled together. They looked at Darren and the girl, desperate for protection. Darren knew he couldn't fight an army alone, and the girl was barely standing. But he also knew there was no turning back. He raised his weapon, standing between the soldiers and the prisoners. "Stay behind us," he told the captives. The girl rose beside him, her hand trembling as she gripped the alien rifle. Her implants flickered weakly, but her eyes burned with defiance. "We fight for them," she said softly. The doors burst open, and a wave of armored soldiers stormed in. Darren tightened his grip, ready for the impossible. For him, this was no longer just about saving one life. It was about proving that even in the darkest place in the galaxy, humanity could still bring light. The chamber shook as the soldiers poured in, their weapons blazing with streams of deadly light. Darren dove behind an overturned pod, pulling the alien girl with him. Energy blasts tore through the room, shattering glass and filling the air with smoke and sparks. The freed prisoners cried out in fear, some crawling back into the shadows, others clutching each other for safety. Darren fired back, each shot deliberate and precise. He was outnumbered, but he made every bolt count. Beside him, the girl lifted, her rifle with shaking hands. Her aim wavered, but her eyes burned with determination. She fired, her blasts cutting down the soldiers who tried to flank them. But the Kareth came in waves, relentless and merciless. Darren knew they couldn't hold out like this. He glanced at the prisoners, at the dozens of pairs of desperate eyes watching him. They weren't soldiers, but they weren't powerless either. They had the same will to live. They had the same fury at the empire that had broken them. "Fight with us," he shouted over the chaos. "If you want freedom, take it now." For a moment, silence seemed to hang in the room. Then one of the prisoners, a tall insectoid with cracked wings, grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon. With a cry that echoed through the chamber, it opened fire. Another followed, then another. Soon the room erupted as the captives turned their fear into rage. The soldiers faltered under the sudden resistance. What had been an easy slaughter became a storm of rebellion. Blasts came from every corner, forcing the Kareth to retreat into cover. The girl staggered to her feet, clutching her rifle tighter. She looked at the freed prisoners fighting beside her, and something inside her shifted. For so long she had believed herself nothing more than a tool, but now she saw others, standing because she had been freed. Hope spread like fire through the room, and she realized she was no longer alone. But the Kareth commanders were not fools. From the corridor outside came a deep rumble. Heavy machinery moved closer, and the walls shook under its weight. Darren's stomach dropped. He knew what it meant. Reinforcements weren't enough. The Empire was unleashing machines of war. The girl felt it too. Her implants pulsed faintly, unstable but still connected to the ship itself. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm to the wall. The metal vibrated beneath her touch, responding to her presence. She could hear the ship's systems like whispers in her mind, chaotic but familiar. Darren saw her struggling. "Don't push yourself. Your body can't handle it." She opened her glowing eyes and shook her head. "If I don't, we all die." Her implants flared, sending arcs of blue energy down the walls. Lights flickered, consoles sparked, and the floor trembled. The approaching war machines screeched as their systems short-circuited. In the chamber, Kareth soldiers clutched their helmets as their weapons sputtered and died. The freed prisoners seized the moment. With furious cries, they surged forward, overwhelming the disoriented soldiers. Darren led the charge, striking down, the last of them with a well-aimed shot. The room fell into silence again, broken only by the gasping breaths of the survivors. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body shaking violently from the strain. Darren rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. Her skin was hot, her implants glowing dangerously. "You'll burn yourself out," he muttered, fear creeping into his voice. She gave him a weak smile. Better to burn for freedom than to fade as their weapon. Darren held her close, his jaw tight. He looked at the prisoners around them, some wounded, some barely able to stand, but all looking at him and the girl as if waiting for guidance. They were no longer captives. They were rebels now, and they needed a leader. He rose to his feet, lifting his weapon high. "We're not done. This ship is theirs no longer. Tonight, it belongs to us." A cheer rose from the prisoners, raw and fierce. Hope echoed through the chamber, strong enough to shake the walls. But above them, alarm screamed louder than ever. The Empire would not surrender its ship so easily. The true storm was still coming. The cheer of the freed prisoners still echoed in the chamber, but it was quickly drowned by the wailing alarms. The ship itself seemed to tremble with fury, as if the Kareth Empire could feel the rebellion growing within its steel veins. Darren tightened his grip on his rifle, scanning the room. He knew the fight was far from over. The alien girl leaned weakly against the wall, her eyes dimming. The strain of controlling the ship had pushed her near her limit, but she refused to collapse. Around her, the rescued prisoners gathered closer, drawn to her glow as though she were their beacon. Darren knelt beside her. "You gave them hope," he said quietly. She shook her head, her voice faint. "Not me. You. You carried fire into the darkness." He didn't argue. There was no time. A deep rumble shook the floor as the sound of heavy steps echoed from above. The Kareth weren't just sending soldiers anymore. They were deploying entire squads of war drones, machines built for extermination. Darren rose, his eyes locking on a side door leading deeper into the ship. "We need the command deck. If we take it, we can control the whole vessel. It's the only way any of us make it out alive." The insectoid prisoner with broken wings, now clutching a stolen rifle, stepped forward. "Then we follow you. Human or not, you fight for us. That makes you our leader." For a moment, Darren hesitated. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He was just one soldier carrying too much pain. But when he looked at the faces around him, the fear, the hunger, the desperate spark of belief, he knew he couldn't deny it. He nodded firmly. "Then stay close. We move as one." The ragtag group of rebels marched through the corridor, Darren at the front, the alien girl close by his side. The ship groaned with every step, its walls glowing faintly with crimson light. From ahead came the clattering of metal claws. The drones were here. The first wave dropped from the ceiling, their spider-like limbs clanging as they landed. Their glowing eyes locked on the rebels, and in an instant, the corridor filled with deadly fire. Darren shouted for cover, pulling the girl behind a collapsed support beam. The prisoners scattered, returning fire with stolen weapons. The air filled with chaos, sparks, and screams. Darren fired rapidly, aiming for the drone's sensors while the insectoid warrior leapt onto one, driving its claws into the machine until it screeched and collapsed. But for every drone that fell, more came. The corridor became a killing ground. The girl pressed her hand to the wall again, her implants sparking violently. She screamed as she forced the ship's circuits to overload. Lights exploded above, frying several drones in a burst of electricity. Smoke filled the hall, and the survivors pressed forward. Darren grabbed her arm, pulling her onward before she collapsed completely. "Don't give everything here," he urged. "Save it for the command deck." They fought step by step, every corner another battle. Prisoners who had once been weak found strength in desperation. An avian creature with torn feathers used its wings to shield others from blasts. A reptilian fighter barreled into drones with its bare claws. One by one, they proved that freedom gave them more power than captivity ever had. Finally, battered and bloodied, they reached a towering set of doors. The command deck. Alien symbols glowed across its surface, and a group of heavily armed Kareth guards stood before it, weapons raised. The girl gripped her rifle tighter, her eyes burning once more. Darren stepped forward, lifting his weapon high. "This is where we end it," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "No more cages, no more experiments. Tonight, we take the ship, or we die trying." The rebels roared behind him, their voices echoing like thunder. The guards raised their weapons, and the final battle for the heart of the ship began. The doors to the command deck loomed ahead, glowing faintly with alien runes. The guards in front of it stood like statues, their armor gleaming under the red emergency lights. Each one carried a massive weapon designed for war, not defense. Darren's stomach tightened. He had fought soldiers, drones, even the Enforcer, but this was the Empire's elite. Behind him, the freed prisoners waited, their breathing heavy, their eyes filled with fear and fire. They knew this battle would decide everything. If they failed here, there would be no escape. The alien girl leaned against the wall, her body trembling, her implants sparking faintly. She looked at Darren, her glowing eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. "We cannot fight them head-on," she whispered. He nodded. "Then we don't. We fight smart." He raised his hand, signaling the rebels to spread out. They moved into the shadows of the corridor, hiding behind shattered walls and overturned consoles. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burned metal. For a moment, everything was still, the calm before the storm. Then Darren stepped forward. He fired the first shot. The blast struck one of the guards in the chest, forcing it back a step. The silence shattered. The corridor exploded into chaos as both sides opened fire. Beams of searing light tore through the air, lighting the hall, in flashes of red and blue. The rebels fought with everything they had. The insectoid warrior leapt from the shadows, driving its claws into a guard's throat. The reptilian alien tackled another, wrestling its weapon away before delivering a crushing blow. Darren moved quickly, firing and ducking behind cover, his movements sharp and relentless. But the elite guards were stronger, faster, and disciplined. They cut down rebels with ruthless precision. One avian fighter fell with a cry, its wings burning. Another prisoner was struck through the chest, collapsing at Darren's feet. His heart clenched, but he kept firing. He couldn't stop now. The girl pressed her hand to the wall again, her implants flaring with unstable light. The ship groaned as she forced its systems to overload. Sparks rained from the ceiling, panels bursting, and two guards screamed as their armor short-circuited. But the effort tore at her body. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth and she nearly collapsed. Darren caught her before she fell, steadying her. "Don't do this alone," he said firmly. Her eyes glistened. "Then fight with me." They rose together side by side and unleashed everything they had. Darren's rifle sang with fire, every shot finding its mark. The girl's implants blazed brighter than ever before, her power spilling out like a storm. The walls shuddered, the floor cracked, and the guards were driven back step by step. The rebels, seeing them stand, surged with renewed strength. They roared as they charged, their weapons blazing, their claws and fists striking with desperate fury. One by one, the guards began to fall. At last, only the commander remained, a towering Kareth clad in black armor, its weapon glowing with deadly energy. It stepped forward, unfazed by the chaos, its gaze fixed on the girl. "You are ours," it hissed in a voice that echoed through the corridor. "You cannot escape what we made you." The girl's body shook, her implants sparking violently, but her eyes shone with defiance. She raised her weapon and whispered, "I am not yours." Darren fired at the same moment she unleashed her power. Their combined strike slammed into the commander, breaking its shield and tearing through its armor. The alien screamed, collapsing to the ground in a shower of sparks and smoke. Silence fell. The last guard was dead. The rebels stood panting, bloodied but alive. Darren turned to the towering command deck doors. "It's ours now," he said. The girl stepped beside him, her hand trembling as she reached for the control panel. "Then let us end this." The doors began to slide open with a deep metallic groan, revealing the heart of the ship, and beyond it, the final trial awaited. The massive doors groaned open, revealing the command deck of the Kareth warship. It was a vast chamber filled with glowing consoles, towering screens, and a throne-like chair at the center where the ship's controller once sat. Every wall pulsed with red light, the heartbeat of the vessel echoing like a living creature. Darren stepped in first, rifle raised. The alien girl followed close, her body weak but her eyes burning with determination. Behind them, the freed prisoners entered slowly, their footsteps uncertain, but their hope stronger than their fear. This was the moment everything had led to. The place where freedom would either be won or destroyed. At the far side of the chamber, the main console pulsed with power. Streams of alien symbols flowed across its surface, lines of energy connecting it to every system of the ship. Whoever controlled it, controlled everything: navigation, weapons, life support, the heart of the beast. The girl's implants flickered as she looked at it. She could feel the pull of the ship calling to her, the same way it had called when she was still their captive. But this time, she was not alone. She glanced at Darren, who gave her a small nod. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We can find another way." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "No, this is the only way, but I will choose what to make of their chains." She walked slowly to the console, her steps unsteady but full of resolve. The implants along her arms glowed brighter with every step, resonating with the ship's systems. The consoles flickered as she touched them, her body sinking with the warship's core. Alarms blared as the ship resisted, its systems fighting against her intrusion. Panels sparked and the floor trembled. The prisoners cried out in fear, but Darren stood firm, keeping his weapon ready in case more enemies came. He knew her battle was not just with the ship, it was with herself. The girl closed her eyes, her body shaking violently. The ship's memory surged through her mind. The screams of captives, the cruel experiments, the endless cruelty of the Empire. For a moment, she nearly broke under the weight of it all. Then she remembered Darren's words. "Mercy is what makes us human." She screamed, forcing her will into the system. The red glow that had filled the room began to shift. Slowly, painfully, it changed to blue. The alarms died down, replaced by a steady hum. The consoles bent to her control. "It's working," one of the rebels shouted. The girl opened her eyes, glowing brighter than ever before. "The ship is ours." A cheer rose from the prisoners, filling the chamber with a sound that had never been heard on a Kareth ship before. Hope. Darren walked to her side, steadying her as she nearly collapsed from exhaustion. "You did it," he whispered. She looked at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "No, we did it." With the ship under their command, Darren turned to the freed prisoners. "This is no longer their weapon. This is our escape, and our beginning." The insectoid warrior spread its cracked wings and let out a cry of triumph. The others followed, their voices joining together in a chorus of victory. For the first time in years, the ship no longer belonged to the Empire. It belonged to those who had been broken but not destroyed. As the rebels prepared to chart their course away from enemy space, the alien girl stood beside Darren at the console. Her scars, her implants, her pain, they were still there. But she no longer carried them as chains. She carried them as proof of survival. Darren looked out at the endless stars beyond the viewport. "The galaxy will never forget what happened here," he said. The girl placed her hand over his. "Then let it remember that even in the darkest night, mercy and courage can light the way." The warship, once a vessel of cruelty, surged forward, into the unknown, now a ship of freedom, carrying survivors who had chosen to rise against their tormentors. And in the silence of space, the Empire trembled.